Hello, everyone. We're just going to get right on in on this historical fiction. Remember, I said there were three types of conflicts that you need to be familiar with, and the three conflicts are a conflict between two characters, the conflict between the character and a difficult situation, and then the conflict within himself, the struggle within himself. And I gave you the example of Phil's brother Paul ruined Phil's new bicycle in an accident, and Phil feels that he cannot forgive Paul. That's a conflict within two characters. And another example of a conflict that we're dealing with is Ellen is tempted to lie and say that her homework is done so that she can go to a friend's house. That's a conflict within a character or within herself. Then there's also Stacy, who cannot swim well, must try to rescue her little sister who has fallen off a dock into a pond. That is a conflict between a character and a difficult situation. So those are the three types of characters that we are going to actually be working with in this historical fiction writing that we're going to do and in the Sign of the Beaver. However, I will talk with you a little bit later about the other types of conflicts as well. Now, the beginning of the historical fiction should do the following. It needs to introduce the main character, introduce the conflict, and introduce the setting. Just like we did with the Sign of the Beaver. We know what the main character, who the main characters are, what the conflict is, and the setting. Excuse me. So in your papers, that's what I'll be looking for as well. In the middle of the historical fiction, you should do the following. Show the characters trying to resolve the conflict. You need to tell how the conflict grows. The ending of the historical fiction should do the following. It should leave the reader with a satisfied feeling. Tell what happens after the conflict is resolved. Okay? Now, I mentioned earlier about a plot diagram. Excuse me. A plot diagram, there's 5 parts to it. 1, the plot diagram has a beginning which tells about the main character and other characters and tells about the setting, giving the reader a sense of a place and time that the story takes place. Secondly, it has a conflict which moves the story from the beginning to the middle. It also keeps the tension in the story. The tension is kind of a story like a rope when you play tug of war. Excuse me. Until the conflict is solved, the tension motivates the reader to want to keep reading the story. The conflict should grow throughout the story. The third thing that the plot diagram does is it has a middle. In that middle, it tells how the conflict grows and shows the characters trying to resolve the conflict. Also within that diagram, the fourth thing is its resolution. The fifth is its ending, which tells what happens after the conflict is resolved. After the conflict is resolved, the tension in the story is gone. So there's nothing to keep the reader reading. The best endings to a historical fiction is a short one. Not a long, drawn-out ending because you're going to lose the reader because the tension's already gone. And that's really in any kind of story. In literature, I said there were 5 types of conflicts. You had man versus self, man versus society, man versus man, man versus nature, and man versus the supernatural. Now I have a question for you, and I'm going to close with this. What do you think the conflict is in the Sign of the Beaver? What do you think that conflict is? Jot that down, email that to me, and I'll give you a couple extra points for that answer. Okay? And we're going to end that for now, and we'll pick up on some tips for drafting the historical fiction. But remember, what I need first is just facts on one of those topics. Thank you.